Hello and welcome to Book Lovers Companion. My name is Edith and right next to me is my lovely co-host, the chattering teacup.
Hello.
And here with us from across the pond, New Jersey, Laury A. Egan. Hello, Laury. Welcome.
Hi there. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Welcome to our show. It's a pleasure to have you on. And we are here to talk about your suspenseful psychological thriller, Doublecrossed.
Yes.
And
I had fun with it.
It was an intriguing read, I have to tell you, that a real page-turner. It came out this year, 2022?
Yes, in the spring.
Mm-hmm. April, I think.
Yes.
Sometime. Mm-hmm. Okay. And you have already quite a few books under your belt, 10 books and a collection of short stories?
Yes. Doublecrossed is my 9th novel, and I have a collection, Fog and Other Stories, and 4 volumes of poetry. So I just published my 10th novel, Once Upon an Island, which is set on St. Croix, which was sort of fun for me because I vowed to write this book when I was 16 years old in 1966. And I finally did it.
Okay, the question would be that what took you so long?
I had other things, I guess, like life.
Yeah, that's to get in the way. Well, the 11th book probably in the making.
Yes.
Yeah, well, of course it is. Yes, of course it is. Okay, but we are here to talk about Doublecrossed. I mean, it's not a romance. It's, I would say, like I said before, a thriller, a psychological thriller. And what I find most intriguing were the topics you touched upon in this thriller. How hard was it to get them right? I mean, it's not, I suppose it hasn't been easy to write and get it right maybe for your readers.
No, it was a complicated book, and I actually changed quite a bit of the plot, particularly at the end. I had a darker ending, and I sort of made it a little more, I won't say upbeat, but I'll say at least somewhat so. But, the basic concept I had from the beginning, and I the title is important because there's a lot of doubling going on throughout, and a lot of double crossing too, for that matter.
Yep, absolutely.
And there are a lot of parts of a story in there. And why did you put everything in one book? I mean, you could have covered more than one, I guess, with all that's happening in there.
It just felt very entwined. And, that's another way of describing this book. There are a lot of interconnections that unfold as the plot goes along, and it delves back into the main character's history and brings it up, involving it with sort of what's happening currently. So there's a lot. The backstory is very important to this particular novel, and it as I say, it weaves in with the present. This is very much a sort of it's sort of in the Patricia Highsmith mode in many ways. This sort of innocent character gets mixed in a sort of spiderweb kind of fashion, the way Highsmith often wrote. And at that point, when I had started this book, which was many years ago, she was a real influence for me. So I think that people who read Highsmith will enjoy this book for sure.
And like you said, I mean, it's about the past, the character's present, but the book is not set actually in our current present, is it?
It's a few years back, yeah. I think before, as I recall, before cell phones were really ubiquitous, which is one of the things I tend to do because cell phones make me crazy because everybody's always connected, and it's very hard to write a mystery or a suspense novel, because everybody knows where everybody is and what they're doing. So, this is set a few years ago. I can't remember exactly the year, but yeah, it's basically more or less present.
Before anybody, like you said, before anyone had cell phones, how do you think would have changed that fact, the story of yours?
Well, I think the characters who sort of go missing wouldn't go missing anymore, for one thing. I mean, they would be tracked down. I mean, there is a computer search that happens by the protagonist to try to find information. But other than that, if this was right now, probably there would be, some kind of a tracker on the cell phone, so she'd know where this person was, or she could find out. So I think it does really does change the way books are written and the plot.
Mm. What can you tell us about the characters in your book? I mean, it's really hard. So far, I would say it's the hardest to describe for our listeners what goes on, because it happens so fast on the one hand. We're not allowed to tell them because they have to find out for themselves what happens and how everything is connected and the twists and turns you put in your story.
I think it's a lot about relationships.
Exactly.
Oh, different kinds of relationships.
Yeah, but I leave it to you.
Thank you.
How much to tell, because I feel I can't.
Well, it is very difficult because things that happen, or even the clues to what might happen, do occur at the fairly, close to the beginning, and we don't want to do any spoilers. Your main character is Alexandra Wyatt, and she meets Marnie Hardwick, quote, in the dark heart of February. That's the first line. And that should give somewhat of a clue. Trouble is going to happen. And for the blurb, I said, ever dream of finding the perfect lover? And again, a hint that, guess what? This isn't the perfect lover. The setting is important here. It's in a house in a remote section with a lot of forest around it. So there's a lot of ominous stuff that happens right at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And I think that pretty well pulls the reader into, okay, what's going to happen, and what's the story here? Because it's strange at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Like the teacup said, it's a lot about relationships, also about past relationships, because we learn a lot about Alex's family relations and how they shaped her as a person, and how they shaped her in the way she enters into a relationship.
Yeah, and still influences her decisions now.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's a very solitary young woman, and her parents divorced when she was fairly young, so she doesn't really have a good feeling about families and models in relationship. Her mother died, and then her father later. And as a result, she's a little at sea. She does have a fair amount of money, which she does try to hide. She just doesn't really want to have any involvement with her finances and a relationship. So she's sort of, careful about revealing things. So in that sense, she's sort of double crossing her new lover, in the sense of not really coming forward with the fact that she could have bought this new house that they buy outright without any trouble. And that she has a second house.
Yeah. And wasn't that also the advice from her mother, not to reveal her financial background at all?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
At least in the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is a sort of a hangover from my grandmother, who told my mother, always keep your finances separate. So I got that drummed into my head at an early age. So I couldn't resist putting that in.
Maybe not the bad advice. I mean, in this case, a good advice.
Yeah, I think it's also about, what do you know about people you get to know, and can you really trust them? That's very difficult.
And that also would bring us to another question, since we mentioned cell phones or mobile phones. I mean, I've read somewhere a few years ago that when you meet someone as a relationship partner, that you would Google him. I mean, did you Google me, Teacup? I didn't Google you, I have to admit.
You wouldn't have found me, but no, I didn't.
No, back then.
You would have found a lot of information on me that's out there.
But isn't it also something that came later, then when your novel is set, wouldn't have been that the case? That someone might have Googled the other person to find out?
Yes. And I think, and that's another reason why I sort of moved this back a little bit. I mean, they have internet and they do have, access to the web, but it's still sort of in early stages. So it's not like, a big player. So I don't think either one of them did that. They didn't do it in the book. And I don't know, I'm trying to think of, I would have done that at that point. I'm not sure. I'm not really sure if I would have done it or not. Now I would, yeah. I would check.
Do you think that's something American? Because I think about it and I can't say that ever crossed my mind.
Well, I don't know if it's just American. It's definitely an American thing. I know that, but I don't know, how prevalent that kind of research on future lovers or new lovers would be elsewhere.
No, I think it's an age thing, because I think people younger than us would really go online and look up other people.
Probably.
Yeah,
more than us dinosaurs.
Yeah,
the two of us.
I'm a T-Rex, aren't I? Yes. I'm the grumpy one. I'm a T-Rex. Yes. I know that.
Don't guarantee anything.
Yeah, that's true. And when you set out writing this novel, was it clear from the beginning that you were going towards a psychological thriller, a game of cat and mouse, as it turns out? Or did it came gradually?
I was writing quite a few psychological suspense novels at that point, and that, again, the Patricia Highsmith influence was there. I have since done more literary work and even a comedy, but at that point, I knew what I wanted to write, and I had the idea about this sort of the false lover concept, and the setting for this book was also very important. I used the floor plan of a house that I had lived in for a little while. I changed the way it looked outside and made it a Tudor instead of a contemporary. But I I really, the floor plan is important. The house is a big setting. And then later, there's some action that takes place on a large sailboat. And I did my homework, in terms of the sailboat and how it was laid out. And I spent a lot of time with marine maps to make sure I had the buoys right going out from New Jersey out into the Atlantic. So I had a pretty good idea from the very beginning what kind of book this was going to be. And I was, as I say, writing, psychological suspense novels. And this was a book that I had put aside for a long while that I came back to. So this is really an earlier concept book, but then I modernized it and polished it.
More or less a sort of a locked room mystery in a sort of way. Like you said, I mean, Patricia Highsmith, okay, this cat and mouse game, but also you said this setting of the house, remote, no neighbors, and we have the sailboat, two kinds of locked rooms.
Yes. So in that sense, it has a cozy feel to it, like a cozy mystery. And yes, I tend to like enclosed settings for whatever reason. I'm a house person, maybe, I don't know. But I like the containment, and it seems like it's like, shaking up a bottle of soda and having it explode, because it's contained. It has that sense of pressure that builds up. And then bang. And as a result, I really enjoy doing house settings. Wave in D minor, which is set on the coast of Maine. During the winter, we have blizzards and everything, but it's predominantly in this one house. And it has somewhat the same feeling, although it's a little more literary work than Doublecrossed is.
And isn't it that when people are in these remote settings, that everything to the characters feels amplified because of the solitude?
Yes, I think so. I think everything is. The emotions are amplified. It's like a ricochet within a small area, and conversations take on a lot of importance as to, subtle bits of behavior. So, this book is very heavy on dialogue and has a lot of telling behavior in it. But I think everything gets compressed when you have a setting like this, as compared to, let's say, your usual thriller type book, which is traveling all over the place, from one country to the next and constantly on the move. And those books are big and open, and you have a lot of activity and movement. My books tend to be a little more compressed.
And isn't it also necessary in such a closed in a closed space that you have to read the others better than anywhere else? Because Alex is always, like you said, it's all about finding out what's going on and so on. Your senses are heightened. I mean, is it not necessary in this environment to get a feel for your opponent, to read them better, to find out what's going to be a few steps ahead?
Yeah, I think that's what's, the reader
what tries to
do.
The
reader is wondering, what's going on, and at times, there's one place in the book, I won't mention where she makes a decision, which actually is the wrong decision. And the reader is probably saying, oh, no, don't do that. But, you think about every, mystery movie or whatever, there's often a case where somebody makes a goof, somebody chooses the wrong door or the wrong exit. And that sort of then increases the falling down of the plot into a nightmare. And I think so the reader is just probably right up along with Alex in terms, maybe a little ahead sometimes, of her own suspicions. I think she's a little naive at first.
Yeah, true. You get the impression.
She wants to have a relationship, a serious primary relationship.
Yeah.
And she's invested into it. And as a result, psychologically, I think she's not always catching stuff that she normally would, because I think she's a wary individual in most cases, but not in this particular instance.
Yeah, probably not.
And is there in this setting also the danger that because of the amplification of everything, that one reads too much into something and then make the wrong decision because of that?
Can you say that again? How do you mean exactly?
When you look very closely at every detail, is there a possibility to read too much into something and then make the wrong decision?
You mean interpret something the wrong way, differently than the other person,
and accuse maybe someone of something that's not there?
Well, she questions herself a lot. Like she tries to sort of pull in the reins and say, no, wait a minute, this is an innocent thing and I'm overreacting. And of course the reader is saying, no, you aren't.
She's right.
Or agreeing that something isn't quite okay. And so I think that there is a lot of that sort of feeling between the reader and Alex, sort of, are we doing the right thing here? Is there anything else we should be thinking about? Or, is there another explanation for Marnie's behavior other than what you suspect? Are you just being overly suspicious or not suspicious enough?
I also wanted to ask you why you choose first-person narration. I mean, I think it's great because it brings the reader closer to Alex, of course. But why choose it anyway?
I don't always. Quite a few of my books have been written in third person. So at this point, I think I wanted to really narrow the viewpoint. So you were just getting her take on things. And to give a private sort of reaction and feeling that she's having as she's going through it, so that the reader feels more intimately tied into her as a character and maybe a little farther away from everybody else. Whereas third person, I think, tends to flatten the distance between characters just a little bit. And so the first person just seemed logical to me for this book.
Is she trustworthy as our narrator?
Not completely. No, as I say, she's got her own little tricks up her sleeve and things that she's not revealing. And that's the other thing. Again, first person is difficult to handle with that. But I think I did it pretty well without, really tipping my hand that she's hiding stuff.
Yeah.
And she is hiding stuff, partly from herself. And she can't remember certain things from her past that were traumatic. So, that's again, and then as I say, she's sort of double crossing her lover too at the beginning by withholding information. And it doesn't really occur to her that Marnie is withholding from her too.
Yeah, exactly. She's lying by omission. Is it as bad as what Marnie does, or not as bad? I mean, you get a different, don't get me wrong, I got a different feeling towards Alex throughout the book when she revealed, I do have things I haven't told Marnie and so on. I thought, yeah, you are the same. But on the other hand, you understand her reason why she does it.
Exactly. But she's not a perfect character.
No.
She's not blameless either. I mean, she's definitely has her secrets. And yes, she should have been open with Marnie at the beginning of the relationship, as one would advise anybody starting a new love affair would. And on the other hand, Marnie is a little bit quiet about her past life and sort of whitewashed it and didn't really go into as much detail, but it didn't occur to Alex. That just didn't, until later that she realized she didn't really know much about this woman at all. And then the same could be sort of true of Marnie's view on Alex. They really didn't know each other very well. Neither one had been honest. So in that way, they're both culpable in a sense.
Then what is their motivation from your point as the writer of the story, that they fell into this kind of relationship where they bought the house, where they moved in together rather fast? Unusual for Alex, wouldn't you say?
Yes, she had never done this before. She'd always she'd had lovers before. That wasn't the issue. And she'd had relationships, but nothing really long-term, nothing with a commitment. And as I say, her family being, divorced at a young age, when she was young, didn't give her a sense of how to deal with relationship like this, but she very much wanted it. And so her want and her need to have it made her sort of go all forward in it, which maybe she shouldn't have, and maybe she wouldn't have under different circumstances, maybe younger years or whatever.
I think she wants to trust Marnie, and up until the point where she can't push her doubts away, but she wants to trust her. As I think the reader wants to trust the main character.
Yeah, which is another reason to do the first person, I think. Yeah. Because, the first person gives the feeling to the reader. She is talking directly to the reader.
Yeah.
And she's confessing what's happening.
It's more personal.
Yeah, absolutely. No spoilers, but the reveal at the end, it was quite astonishing. Who was involved as well? Because I, for example, had it completely wrong. My thoughts were completely wrong. I would be a crap detective. I admit it. Well done. And you want to find out what's going on. Will she survive? Actually, how is it going to end? I mean, dear listeners, you want to know how it's going to end. What else is there we can find out? You have to read it, because I wanted to know what's going on, what's going to happen to our main character, and how will it end, and how will she solve the puzzle? She did it. I mean, perfectly. And I mean, especially at the end, the conclusion of everything, and at the very last few pages, you added another. I thought, really? Damn. Didn't see that one coming, to be honest.
Well, that ending was difficult. As I said, I rewrote that a couple of times. There was a completely different ending. Well, similar. The location is the same, and a lot of the information was the same, but what happened was a little different. But I realized, I had another way I could go on it. And so I was I'm much more pleased with the way it came out. Now, that was one of the things that had been bothering me all the way through, over the years with this book. And so finally, when I came to and realized how I should end it, then I felt really comfortable with it.
Would you also say that your book could be found or should be found in the mainstream psychological thriller shelf?
Absolutely. I consider myself a bridge writer in the sense that I have written some books like A Bittersweet Tale, The Outcast Oracle, and a few others that have been written for general market, and they don't really have gay characters in them. But then others are more abridged books that have, like Wave in D Minor has a main character who's not really sure about her sexuality, but there are a lot of gay characters in the book. So I go all over the place, but I don't write for a real audience, and I don't write specifically usually for the LGBTQ group. I have a lot of readers in that market, and I'm happy to have them. But I tend to write books. I tend to write the book that needs to be written, and whatever that is, so be it. And as a result, and I don't always stick to the same genre. As I said, I've got these psychological suspense novels that I really love to write. In fact, the one I'm working on right now is in that category. Oh. But as a result, I can definitely go into comedy or other areas. Young adult I've written, and I have a romance novel that I'm going to be shopping apparently soon. So, I tend to write the book that just comes to me, and sometimes it's channeling a main character. Sometimes it's a what if situation like Doublecrossed. What if you met your perfect lover? What would happen? Or a setting like the first book is set in Venice, which with all of its wonderful entangling canals and streets, just seemed perfect for, a very, very psychologically complicated book. Yeah. So I write various, kinds of books, and I'm very happy to sell this as a general market book too.
At the beginning of your book, there's a trigger warning because a few topics in this book, or one topic in this book, is, like you said, Teacup, it's quite extraordinary relationship-wise. I would be interested in the reaction of your readers, what the reaction was. Without
I don't like
spoilering.
I don't like putting warnings in books. I was forced into doing that. I really think that's silly, frankly. And maybe this is my age rather than anything else, but this seems to be what everybody's doing these days. Publishers, small publishers, lesbian publishers, or LGBTQ publishers in particular seem to be wanting to put warnings on. Now, I remember one beta reader that I had requested who was very gung-ho reading about the book, and then she banged into a topic in the book that upset her, so she refused to finish the book, said it was really well written, but she just didn't want to go there. So I don't know. I feel very mixed about warnings, and there's some hot button topics in this book, yes. But I think they're treated with more of a psychological, almost sympathetic, almost on the edge of sympathetic, treatment that makes it, I think, palatable.
Yeah, it does. It absolutely does. And I can imagine it must have been hard to write it that way, to get it right. What I mean, actually.
I think if you get into the heads of the people that are the characters, things often make more sense to a character. And if you get to understand that character's motivations and background, their behavior isn't quite as offensive or as difficult to understand.
Yeah. It's like you said, when you get into the character's mind, what makes him or her tick, that's the important part.
You start to understand their reasoning for doing what they do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well. Now, if you have a serial murder, say, which is not in this book, but if you do, even they will have usually some kind of really traumatic background, but they are a lot harder to sympathize or empathize with because of the horrible nature of what they do. Here, this is not quite as hot, and I think people will come through this book and sort of understand why things happen as they do.
Why is this need? You just said about trigger warnings. There is every small publisher and everyone does it. Why is it? Why is it at the moment that we are forced to put them in there? Because topics like, I don't know, we could slap a trigger warning on a book about a serial killer. I mean, people get murdered. No, really, it's a crime fiction story. Why this need?
I don't know whether this is an American thing. It might be because we're so agitated in this country about everything. And I think we've just gone too far. And I don't think warnings should be in books. Movies I could see, because a movie could be watched by a child inadvertently, but they're not so likely to pick up a book and go to a bookstore or Amazon and buy a book. I would feel comfortable with a more general publisher who also happens to cover lesbian stories or whatever.
Yeah. Just like we mentioned before we came on, Mariana's books. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, she has a general publisher, because that's not the main theme. Like I said, being a lesbian or describing a lesbian or gay relationship isn't the main thing in your book either.
No.
It's the thriller thing, the psychological thriller thing. That's the main part, not the relationship being gay or lesbian.
Yes. Yeah, and that's often what happens in a lot of my novels. It's sort of a side issue, or, it may be a very important part of it, but it's not the part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Would you also agree that we need more of that? Just having more like what you write. Just writing a thriller, writing, I don't know, crime fiction, horror or whatever. And just gay and lesbian relationships, not the main part, the subplot, for example.
I fully agree. And last year I was a judge for an LGBTQ book things. And, I got mostly mystery novels. And I was pretty horrified at the level of writing to begin with, which wasn't very good. And the other issue was that the books just seemed to be swarming with lesbians. I mean, it was like, there can't be that many lesbians in this town. I mean, I wanted some balance. I wanted some, how it really would be. I mean, the tendency, this sort of inclusiveness, this tight little community stuff. No, thanks. No, I like to include and do it gracefully, smoothly, and realistically.
Yeah.
Not just, I'm not writing for a little group of people, just read lesbian novels.
Yeah.
That's why I like Marie Hanna or Val McDermott or some of these other really great lesbian writers who are very successful. Like, Highsmith is another. There are quite a few.
Yeah. It's one thing to write romance, I'd say, because that's where you expect it. I mean, guilty as charged on this end, because, it's romance. I mean, we put on our, I don't know, pink tinted glasses and go lovey-dovey all the way, but not with a mystery.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But it's the same with general romance books. I mean, you don't expect them to be realistic, and they're not. So that's
true.
A special genre, so to speak.
Yeah, but you would expect, like you said, more realism in a mystery, in a thriller, in a crime fiction book.
I never thought of that. Interesting idea. Yes, I think you're right.
I mean, that's what I would expect as a reader.
Yeah, because the relationship is with multiple people in a large, in an environment, whereas a romance is mostly between two people and then, with opposing forces or whatever outside of that. But I think the thrust is different.
Yeah.
Although that's, I think that is changing, particularly I think with gay males and their romances, I think often they tend to be a little more natural in terms of, the real world. Although not necessarily a pure romance. I'm thinking of somebody like Rick Reed, who I know, and he writes a nice book. But I do think you're right. I think mysteries are a little different than a lesbian romance.
I mean, would you say that we can trust the general public, the audience, that they can cope with it, or should they be shielded from such relationships again? Who knows?
Give them a chance.
Yeah, give them a chance, maybe.
I think that the world has changed enough that we're pretty calm about. I mean, we've been reading about heterosexual romances and love affairs for how many decades, years, centuries, and we don't think anything about doing that. I think people are getting pretty cool about it. I'll give you a little story. For one of my books that just came out in January, Turnabout, I went to a local sailing club, which was for teenagers, okay, because I wanted to photograph one of the boats because the book is called Turnabout, and that's the name of the class boat. And they had one of the few of the particular kind of boat that I wanted. There aren't many left. And so I sat down at the bench while these kids were waiting to go sailing, and they were chatting amongst themselves. And these were 10 to 17-year-old kids. And one of the girls was saying, well, I might try, lesbian relationship. I think it'd be cool. And then another one said, yeah, me too. And, and one of the guys said, well, I got together with this guy not too long ago. I mean, I'm also dating a girl. They were just so calm about the whole thing. And, this was just a group of maybe 15 kids. Nobody thought anything about this.
Yeah.
And they were just not into categories. And I thought, well, this is a harbinger of what is happening.
Yeah.
And their views are going to affect their parents' views, grandparents' views, etc.
Yeah.
And so I think that people are fine with reading about two women getting together, for example, a love affair.
Yeah.
I think it's getting there. I mean, sure, there are going to be some people in our country, my country in particular, that may not be so calm about it. But I think the majority of people are moving in that direction.
Yeah.
You never get 100%. There's always someone against whatever.
Yeah, you can't please everyone. That's simply not done. I also wanted to ask you about the supposed advice of write what you know.
Well, yeah, I think that's usually a good idea. I was told that when I was about 10 or 11 and I was writing poems in a story. And actually, I wrote my first novel started it when I was 12. And a writer that my mother knew had, read some of my work and was really happy about it. And he gave me that piece of advice. So I think it's pretty good because you need to feel authentic about what you write about. And even if it's not something you've experienced yourself, if you can figure out how the character ticks, you can get into their head. I've read a lot on psychology. That was a real interest in mine in college. So I feel like that's a natural bent for me. Sometimes I have to look up stuff, but, I wrote a book about an opera tenor he gets hired to be a soprano and sing, so he's taking wigs off and everything. But I know a lot about opera because I was a subscriber at the Met for 30 years and I photographed there. And so, I mean, almost every book of mine, there's something that I'm pretty adept at, or either experienced or place I've been. In most cases, I do write a lot about that. The drama is not necessarily something I experienced, but place or a person. Yeah.
But is it also, would you say, a thing that might hold one or the other author back? Just write what you know, with emphasis on just what you know.
No, I wouldn't. I think that's too restrictive. I think you have to write what comes to you. Mm-hmm. And then if you're in uncharted areas for yourself in terms of an experience you haven't had, place you've never been, I would tend to say put the setting in some area that even if you've only been there for a short while on a trip, because I think that helps you get a visual grounding of the smells, the sights, all the sensory details. That's really important. So that's a good, write what you know task. But I think you have to write the book that comes to you or the person that comes to you. I've done some things that are really sort of creepy, like channeling, where I'll be sitting on my deck or something, minding my own business, and a character will come to me. It won't go away until I come to the computer and sit down and start to type, and out he or she comes. And I was like, oh, I don't know who you are. I've never been anybody like you, but okay, here you are. So, that happens.
And are you, since you said the character comes along the way and tips you on the shoulder, are you a planner or are you a pantser?
Oh, I am a very organic writer. I tend to, occasionally I'll know where I'm going to get to at the end, but usually I like to have it happen as I go along. because I enjoy the pleasure of finding out for myself what's going to happen.
Okay.
I'm not a person that does little cards and, charts and stuff. I do keep timelines just so I don't get myself fouled up. And I do draw sketches of houses inside, layouts, and that sort of thing. But other than that, no.
And did you ever have to rewrite because of that, because the story changed in a completely different way?
Yeah, occasionally. Yeah. Well, Doublecrossed is a good example of that, where I had to really redo a good bit of the last third of the book because it didn't reflect well on the main character. Let's put it that
way. I'm also wondering if, may I ask, if the indie road has ever been in your mind? Because after what you told us about the experience you had with one of the publishing houses and your book, did it occur to you that you might change direction and go indie?
Do you mean self-publishing?
Self-publishing, indie, in a way?
Yeah, I use indie as a small publisher, but it's becoming, current to indicate that that's self-publishing, which I think is incorrect, but that's what seems to be what everybody's calling them. Yes, I have thought about it recently because I've been frustrated with, I was a book designer all my career. I worked for Princeton University Press and 20 some other publishers. So I won lots of national awards for book design. I'm a fine arts photographer. Typography matters. Book design matters to me. And let's face it, this is not what's going on in the small press world. I mean, the things that are just, I just consider standard bookmaking are not there. So I have one very complicated magical realism project that if I can't find a publisher for, I may do that one myself because I really like the book and they're two partially linked novellas, so it's sort of a little Orlando-esque or a little bit like Nightwood, like Katrina Barnes' Nightwood has a little of that very strange quality to it. So if I can't find a publisher, I may go in that direction, but I still want the imprint. I think it really solidifies people's view of the book because when I do readings, I can't tell you how many times people put up a hand and say, did you self-publish this book or was it traditionally published? And if I were to say self-published, I think that would be a negative. And I still like to have, even if I'm doing a lot of the work, the editing and the design myself, I'd still like to have the another perspective and have the imprint of somebody choosing this book.
Now I want to know, what, in your opinion, does a good design need?
For a cover?
For example.
It should be attractive and it should be reflective of the book itself. The typography should be well done. I do a lot of kerning, which is, the letter fit, because I do a lot of my own covers. I managed to sweet talk my way into doing them. And as a photographer, not all of my books have my photographs on them. In fact, Doublecrossed is one of my photographer students who I sent out to take this picture. I art directed it. But others, like Once Upon an Island, that a lot of them are my designs, not all. The worst one was the first book, Jenny Kidd, which I was forced to take this cover, and it has hurt sales horribly. So, yeah, I think it's important. I think it's, sophistication is important. It's just like, it's the first meeting somebody has with a book.
I have to ask. I simply have to ask you that since we just talked about design and covers and it has to fit, since you mentioned before you like Mari Hanna's books and you've probably seen the different covers for the European version and the United States version.
I haven't, but I bet they're interesting.
They are. I mean,
let's say they're different.
They're quite different. I mean, on the European versions, you usually have a landscape or what was it? A murder wall, I think, where you have a wall, wall and landscape, and you only see a woman from behind in a coat.
Not very detailed.
Not very detailed at all. Dark, and
I didn't think that was a good cover.
Yeah, and then you have she showed it to us. The American cover where you have the woman from the waist down. She's wearing a mini skirt, high heels, and a gun in her hand. Yes, that's exactly how a English cop would look like. Yes.
Yeah, but not like her. Didn't look like her.
No,
I
because
thought that was just ridiculous.
yeah, I mean,
And I don't know why.
that's completely.
Sometimes authors are stuck. They really don't have much clout. The bigger the company, I think it's tougher to get your way or have your opinion expressed.
I think she didn't have any say in this
Not with the American one, I think.
Not with the American
I bet she
thing.
didn't.
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, high heels, miniskirt, and weapon. Not going to happen in the United Kingdom for a female police officer. But that's what, I mean, it wouldn't ring true with us, over here. So it's...
Well, if you watch British crime films, most of the female detectives are wearing flat shoes or boots or sneakers.
Yeah, sensible footwear.
Yeah, if you're on your feet a long time.
Yeah, the British don't wear heels like Americans do. I mean, or other countries. I think it's silly. I didn't like that cover either.
Yeah, that's something that's something. For example, if I had seen that on Amazon or in a bookshop, that would have put me off. For example, I would have. Oh, come on. Not again.
And I don't know what it is, but it seems that at least the publisher think for certain types of books, certain covers are expected. I don't know why, because some books you buy although they have this cover, not because of the cover.
Yeah. That's what I bought it for. I would have been turned off, but I think and I could be wrong, and maybe I'm making a sexist point of view, but I think male promotional directors want to have a sexy female quality to the books and the characters on the covers, and that's what they're projecting. And, even if that's completely wrong for the book and the personality of the main character, as it is in this case, not that she's not sexy, but she's not, heterosexually sexy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think it's really awful when they get pressured into that. As I said, it's happened to me. So it's very frustrating. Now, on the other hand, I've been on the other side of the fence as a book designer for many years. I designed over 1,000 books, from the inside manuscripts to bindings and jackets. And very rarely did we have much interface with the authors. These are nonfiction books, but I also work with some poets, fairly famous poets. But, usually I tried to figure out what fit, what was comfortable. I was very sensitive, particularly the poetry books.
And since you have so many books already under your belt, working on number 11 already, what would be your advice for any aspiring author out there?
Sit in the chair. Just do it. I think there are really two things. Learn how to use punctuation. Learn how to write. Find your own style, and then work on it. Polish constantly. I do anywhere from 25 to 45 rounds on a novel before I let it go to be formatted. Doublecrossed, I think, was probably up at the high end of that zone. People get excited and then they send off something too early. And, if you can get a decent beta reader or 2 or 3 to give you honest feedback, excellent. Pay attention to whatever he or she says. But I think you need to really clean up your act, know how to use punctuation. For us, we use Chicago Manual of Style. Everybody should have a copy of that.
Isn't that, sorry to interrupt, isn't that something very American again?
Chicago Manual of Style.
Yeah.
It is the premier book on style and writing in the United States that most publishers use. And it's still old school enough for me. I mean, I still use the Oxford comma, and when I'm reading books these days, it's hard to turn off my editorial head. So I usually am going crazy with modifiers and misplaced modifiers and other issues. I think that sitting down and doing it is the main thing, and start maybe with short stories and then work your way up. As you go, because you can really develop your style in a shorter form, and then just expand it and keep going. Patience. Patience, very important.
Any advice on point of view problems? If you have a problem with sticking to your point of view, just asking for a friend.
Well, because I tend to write either third person image or first person, I stick in the point of view of the character. Now, I have books that alternate characters, so he or she will have their point of view, but I keep them very separate. It drives me nuts to have this sort of omniscient point of view where somebody is switching back and forth. I think it's very confusing to the reader. So I tend to do one or the other, either intimate, third person, or first person. I take it you don't agree with me, or you don't write that.
No, I have a problem. That's why I'm doing that. What you just mentioned.
It takes practice, and sometimes like if you're describing somebody and you say, "Well, they're suspicious." Well, then how do you know they're suspicious?
Yeah.
He or she. Because you can't just say he's suspicious. He's got to have some kind of behavioral change or something in his dialogue has to indicate suspicion. So otherwise, you're just making an assumption, and that's a point of view issue that can come up.
Because I'm always quite sure because I see it clearly.
I think the problem,
but I can't.
I think the problem is what is really written on the page. And what is up in your head? Because there's more. And if there's something missing on a page, readers get confused.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's very hard to edit your own work. I mean, that's why I have to do it so many times. And I usually try to give myself a couple of weeks in between because otherwise it's like a big Rolodex in your head. It just, oh, yeah, I read it. And you can't really look at it cold to see if these sentences make sense or if your paragraph, the order of the lines is correct. I mean, that's particularly in thoughts. I mess that up all the time.
Do you also read it out loud? Because one of our guests once said reading it out aloud also helps to find troubles in your style or in your plot or in anything at all.
I definitely do it for poetry. I do it somewhat, particularly at the ending. I feel like endings are one of the hardest things to write. And I liken it to a symphony or something else. It has to feel like bum, 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 bum. It's done. And it may just be a question of changing a few words around in the sentence to make that feeling of closure that the reader feels satisfied and knows, it's over. But that I will read in the beginning. I usually read those aloud for sure. And sometimes dialogue if I want to sort of see how the characters are bouncing off of each other. Because sometimes I truncate and abbreviate dialogue too much and it needs expansion. Yeah.
And what else, Laurie, would you like to share with our audience about future plans or anything at all?
Well, I'm very excited about my newest book, Once Upon an Island, which is set on St. Croix in 1966, when I was there myself. And this is one book that I do actually allow myself some autobiographical inclusions. So in a sense, this is for my friends, it's a fact or fiction kind of quest out there. But I had read Lord of the Flies by William Golding just around that point. And then when I went to the island, I was fascinated with the idea of, again, compression in a sense. That it was not a house, but it was definitely an island. And I wondered why they moved to islands, how the island mentality changed them. And so, as I said, I promised to write a book one day, and it just took me 56 years to have it in my hand. But I'm really pleased. It's my big book, I think. And then, so I would definitely recommend that. And I really love Wave in D minor, which is literary suspense set on the Maine coast during winter. So, and it's about an opera composer, a young woman. An opera composer.
So another sort of locked room mystery.
Yes, definitely. The house is a big player. Yeah.
And has it, or did you ever think of writing a sort of series with a detective as a main character? Does that appeal to you or not at all?
I'm just trying. I haven't known because I don't feel like I know enough about how they operate. You think with the number of books I read, I would, but no, actually, I haven't. No, I find that they can be a part of my books, but they're not. They can be a subset, secondary character. But no, I haven't tackled that.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I understand, because it takes a lot of getting into a lot of research how to get it right.
That's why some people use amateur sleuths
to
get around it.
Yes, exactly.
Like a journalist, for example. That's I just finished a book where the journalist there was a detective and a journalist, and that is sort of a trope you see quite often.
Yeah, true. Teacup, anything else? No? Did we tackle everything?
I think so.
Yeah, so do I. So,
otherwise, we remember too late.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. It would be a shame. But nothing from me as well. So, Laury, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, it's been a pleasure. It's such a pleasure. Great.
It was wonderful talking to you. Thank you for your time. And
thank you.
It was great.
You did enjoy this episode as much as we did? Then hit subscribe and don't miss the next episode. Also, make sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. If you like to support us and buy us a coffee, you can do so via Buy Me a Coffee and other platforms. You can find all the necessary links in the description. Until next time.